Hello and welcome back to Sewing Machines Decoded Part 2 with Wear What You Make. In today's talk, I want to share with you some very handy, very useful sewing machine troubleshooting skills that you will need when you are operating your sewing machine. So before we get into any specifics, there are two things that I want you to know. The first is that these output issues happen to all of us, whether we are stark beginners or experienced veterans, or any experience level in between those two extremes. The second thing that I want you to know is that your commitment to and your ability to troubleshoot these issues when they come up is going to determine whether or not these particular issues stop you from completing your sewing projects. Yep, that's right. It will if you don't do it. And that's why we're going to talk about some skills that you're going to need when it comes to troubleshooting your machine, all right? So let's go. So the first thing that I want to go over with you guys is your sewing machine top thread tension. I have here my sewing machine manual, and I'm in the section where it talks about adjusting top thread tension. And tension is basically how tight or how loose your stitches are. So in this particular section, what I love about it is that it shows me why I may need to adjust my tension as it pertains to stitching output issues. So these two issues right here is if your top stitch is too tight or your top stitch is too loose. So what they mean by your top stitch is this stitch right here on your fabric. So basically what this is that you have sewn together two pieces. Let's say that you sewed together two garment pieces. This is the top part, this is the bottom part. And so what this is saying is that on this top side, right here, if your top stitch is too tight on this top side, that means that you need to decrease your tension. And one of the things that I absolutely love about this diagram is that it shows you why this stitch is wrong and what it looks like. And it also shows you what the stitch should look like on both the top and the bottom. So when you go to adjust your tension, you want to decrease your tension if the top stitch on the fabric is too tight. You're going to do that by taking it from whatever setting it's on and shifting it to decrease it. And what it's going to do, like say that this is on auto, it's going to put it on -1. And if you're on -1, -2, it's going to move it to the next part over, or the next number below that number. So the same goes if your top stitch is too loose, or similarly goes if your top stitch is too loose. If that top stitch is too loose, it's going to look like this. And then you want to increase your tension, and you're going to turn your tension dial in the opposite direction that you did when you're decreasing it. So in this instance, you're going to go from auto to +1 or 1. And this also shows you where your tension dial is on your sewing machine, and it is going to look exactly how it is pictured in your manual. So before we go on to the next two parts on two things that you will need to do in order to be able to effectively troubleshoot, I want to show you two stitches. One is how your stitches should look, and the second is how they should not look. This first stitch right here is how your stitches should look, whether you have one piece of fabric, two, or however many pieces of fabric. It should look like this on the top and on the bottom. And that is essentially what the manual was saying in the last part, is whatever your top part of your fabric is, if it's too loose or too tight, this is what it was basically referring to. You can have one piece or two pieces or more, and if the top part of whatever you stitched is too tight or too loose, it's telling you how to troubleshoot it. Now, I want you to take a look at this next stitch. This is basically what those stitches look like in the last part that we just did when we were talking about top thread tension, okay? But what I find interesting is that this is what happened when I purposely did not correctly thread my bobbin. So this particular issue where your top thread is too loose or too tight may not always be due to your top stitch, top thread tension, it could be due to something else. Now, going back to this particular stitch, this looks just like the ones that, or it looks a lot like the ones we just looked at. And then on the backhand side, there's some bunching going on. Your thread definitely should not look like that. So the second thing that I want you to make sure that you are taking a look at is your bobbin thread feed. Mine is a drop-in. Yours might be front loading, and so it may look differently. And if you remember from the last part, I was saying that I purposely threaded this incorrectly. As you can see right here, there's a little manual or a little picture that shows me how the thread should go. I purposely did not put the thread in this part to see what it would do. I simply just dropped my bobbin in and let the thread feed up that way. So, of course, you don't want to do that on purpose, but let's say that you were really getting into this project and you did not notice that the thread came out of that loop. What you want to do is you just want to make sure that you rethread it, make sure that it is done exactly according to how your sewing machine manual, or you might have a diagram like this on your sewing machine like I do, came like that, which I think is pretty cool. But make sure that it is threaded in this manner. Put your bobbin back in. And my particular bobbin setup, I can't adjust the tension on it. I would probably have to get a professional to do it, but it's already set up. So really all I have to do is make sure that my threading is done correctly. And if that's the case with yours, make sure that you are always checking to make sure that your bobbin threading is loaded correctly. So the third thing that I want you to make sure that you are always looking at when it comes to troubleshooting any output issues with your sewing machine is to make sure that your top threading feed is done correctly. Again, I have a diagram that shows me where to put my threads. So let's say that maybe one part or two parts are skipped. Let's say that maybe this isn't in there, this isn't in the tension feed right here, and that it's not there. Let's say that I skip and go right to here. Maybe I'm having a bad day, or maybe I'm trying to do things quick and I'm not paying attention, or maybe I missed something down here and I don't load it. You are probably going to get similar stitching output issues as I did when I incorrectly threaded my bobbin. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure that you are correctly threading any thread that you have in your top thread feed. Make sure that you don't miss anything. Just go through there and do it exactly as your diagram or your manual instructs. I would encourage you to go through your manual to see exactly how they want you to thread it and get familiar with that. And that is the third troubleshooting thing that you need to get familiar with, is making sure that your top threading is done correctly. Now, the fourth troubleshooting technique that I want you to always keep in mind is to make sure that you have appropriate needles for your project at hand, and to make sure that you are changing your needles out regularly. It really just depends on you how often you change them out. If you sew a lot, you may want to stick to maybe 3 to 6 months or less. If you notice that stitches are starting to skip more and your machine was working just fine, you may want to change them out and see if that helps, in addition to steps number 1 through 3 that we just talked about. But basically, this is a sewing machine needle package that I have, and as you can see, it has universal and ballpoint, so basically woven and knit. You want to make sure that you are using the right needles for the job. And I mentioned in the first part of our series that you can definitely reference your sewing machine manual for this information. It's going to tell you what size that you will need, and it'll also give you the color code on those sizes so that you can make sure that you are correctly putting the right size needle for the job. All of that is inside of your sewing machine manual. All right, guys, that concludes part 2 of our Sewing Machines Decoded series. I really want you to learn these 4 troubleshooting techniques and then build on them. So if you have questions about anything that I went over, If you tried these things and you're still having issues, it doesn't matter. Make sure that you leave your questions below, or you can contact me directly. Either way. And as always, for my more seasoned sewers, I would love to know what you think. Here's the next thing, guys. Look, I don't want you feeling bad because it looks like your sewing machine tried to eat your fabric. I've been there. We all have been there. So make sure that you utilize your resources, you ask questions, and you get over that fear of your sewing machine. All right, so that concludes our talk. And make sure that you stay tuned for part 3. We'll talk soon. Bye. Shiva came to say hi, guys. She wanted to know what mom was up to, and she wanted to say hello. Say hi. Hi. He's so sweet. Remember, kiss, kiss. Thank you. He's so sweet. Oh, there we go. Tommy, that's that.